I'm Dawn Richards. I'd like to welcome you to what was the final workshop, PDI workshop, but there's been a next one added at the request of counselors next week. So make sure you register for that. Today we'll be focusing on transportation and logistics. I am the Career Pathways Director for the St. Louis region for DESE, and I work closely with STEMSTL and St. Louis graduates to help put on these workshops for you. So here's the agenda for today. We're going to place it in the chat, if I'm not mistaken, for you to be able to follow along. And just a little bit of housekeeping rules. If you're not speaking, if you could keep your speakers muted, your mics muted, and just be patient and mindful that things happen. We may see pets that come to join us. We may see children that come to join us, but just be patient and kind and courteous to one another, and just, it's Friday. Let's just relax a little bit and take in some great information. If you don't mind, you can turn your cameras on, but if you don't want to, that's okay as well. You can still get great information. The PDI agreements will also be in the chat, and just if you have questions, make sure that you put them into the chat, and someone is monitoring the chat today, so they will get to your questions as you put them in there, and we won't forget you, I promise. The session is being recorded, so just be mindful of that as well, and it will be available later on the PDI website, on the St. Louis Graduates website. And at the end, if you would be a gem, just a wonderful gem, a diamond, please, and fill out the evaluation survey that helps us for planning future events and making sure that we get good feedback. So thank you for that. Okay. Next, we're going to have our mindful moment. This is where we take some time to do, you can go back to that slide just so we can highlight it and make sure. Well, there's a PDI added next week to help with navigate the Navigate system with St. Louis Community College for counselors to help their students walk through that. So sign up for that. It's available as added special just for you at the request of the counselor. So make sure you register.
I was lucky enough. I am not Tiff Davis. I wish I were Tiff Davis because she is amazing. She is the head of the Workforce Solutions Group at St. Louis Community College, and she is kind enough to be our source of data on labor markets throughout these different career clusters. She couldn't make it this morning, but she did share with me a little slide deck to talk about what job openings look like for transportation, logistics, and supply chain. So I will be doing like the secondhand, not TIFF version of this. As per usual, you will receive materials as a follow-up to this meeting. So if you're interested in taking a closer look at some of this data, you'll have that. TIFF is also always welcome to take questions on this information. She's a wonderful source of knowledge. So if you have questions, I'm happy to connect you with TIFs so you can get your questions answered. So here's the overall labor market overview for transportation and logistics. Things are a little small. This graph at the top, you can see that for staffing across this entire cluster, over half of the jobs are in transportation and material moving itself. So this is going to include like the truckers and the labor and freight movers. And then, a little less than half, that's going to be the other like supporting roles in this, office and admin, sales and related, and then some miscellaneous job roles. And you can see here, if you want to take a closer look, again, you'll have these slides after this morning. The first column is the occupation. The second is the employment in the region. So we can see this entire cluster is just around 30,000 jobs. Again, the top job roles are for those heavy and tractor trailer truck drivers, and then the laborers and freight stock and material movers. The third column is the average annual wages. So as you're working with your students, you can give them a sense of what each job role will earn you in a year. And then the last column on the right, that's the annual demand. So how the industry is growing year over year. TIF was kind enough to break down the job roles into this now, next, later framework that Merrick uses, St. Louis Community College uses. Now jobs are the jobs that are basically going to be accessible almost immediately after high school. So you have your high school diploma. It'll probably be on the job training or very short-term training to get you into that job, a now job. The next jobs are a middle skill job, so something short of a 4-year degree, but some kind of training. So if it's an associate's or if it's an industry recognized credential, some training beyond high school. And then the later jobs, those are generally going to require a 4-year degree or more. Some of these are going to be like master's level roles. So for transportation and logistics, this is the general breakdown of the now, next, later roles. So you can see you have this part of the table. These are going to be the now roles, so things that your students can get right out of high school, including the laborers, the freight, stock, and material movers, light truck and delivery services, drivers and sales workers. The next, these are going to require some kind of credential or license. So heavy and tractor trailer truck drivers, thinking CDL, some of the sales representatives in manufacturing, production planning, clerks, automotive service technicians and mechanics. So some kind of credential in there. And then finally, these are the roles that are going to require a bachelor's degree or higher. So the managers, people who are like doing the logistics, sales managers, some of the computer support, the IT tech guys that you're going to see, guys and gals. And then here again, we have the annual wages. The starred occupations, those are based on projected job openings. So when we think about those kind of high growth careers where we want to direct our students, so we have that job security 10 years into the future, these are projected from 2018 to 2028 to have the greatest number of projected openings. TIF sent over the top skills and certifications. So this is based on job openings, job listings, what employers are looking for. So you can see the top 10 basic skills. These are like the ones that just come up over and over again. You're going to see some things that are, like a specific skill, including Excel. I don't know that we categorize that as, a soft skill at this point, but I would say it's being seen over and over again as a competency across industries. But a lot of those, like if we call them soft skills or 21st century skills, power skills in Dr. McCoy's language, transportable skills in STEMSTL language, but communication, organization, teamwork, collaboration, those are really looked for across the board in this industry. The specialized skills for transportation and logistics, customer service, forklift operation, repairs, hazmat. Again, you'll get these so you can see what the specific skills are. The software skills, which I think is a useful tool for thinking about how to advise students into like the next phase after high school, if it's going to NPower, if it's going to a community college, but like what are the software skills that can help you in the logistics world? Again, like we're going to see the Microsoft Office suite is critical, but then you can get into specifics like SAP and SQL, CRM, Salesforce. So all of those are useful throughout this job cluster. And then in terms of specific certificates for this industry, we're looking at the commercial driver's license, the OSHA forklift certification, and then various additional credentials that you can get here, including hazardous materials certification, and then some like repair occupations certifications. This is pretty hard to see. I'm going to give this to Laura so it can be sent out as a separate document. But TIF was kind enough to break down this industry cluster into sort of 3 different like sub pathways. So in blue, this is the heavy and tractor trailer truck driver, like general cluster. And then you can see job roles within here. So like truck drivers, bus drivers, transit and intercity, highway maintenance workers. If you look at passenger vehicle drivers, except bus drivers, transit and intercity, you can see here some of the other job roles, including drivers and sales, parking attendants, couriers and messengers, baggage porters and bellhops. And then finally, if you look at laborers and freight stock and material movers, this is really shipping, receiving, and inventory clerks. So just an idea of thinking of major pathways that have sort of branches into different job roles within this industry. But you will have all of these documents to review after this and get a better look at. And with that, I am going to hand things over to Brad Reinhardt, one of our guest speakers. He is the president at Rockfarm St. Louis, a logistics company. Brad, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Kate and everybody, thank you for inviting me to speak today. I've been in the logistics industry for my whole career. So when I was typing everything out yesterday, kind of hit me. It's damn near 30 years that I've been in it. So it's been a bit, and I absolutely love my industry. Wouldn't want to be in any other industry. It's been great for me and my family, but I'm just a big fan of it, big believer, and have met some great people along the way. So I'm always willing to kind of talk our industry up and get as many people involved in it as we can. So I'll start with kind of my background a little bit with the how my travels led me here. And the main reason for this slide is to show over my almost 30 years now, I've been at 7 different stops. So the last 4, I've actually owned my own company, and that's kind of an agency model. So I've been associated with those 4 bottom companies. And for different reasons, I left those companies and moved my company somewhere else. But my point here mainly is only having 7 different jobs, I guess, in our industry is really not that many. Our industry is very forgiving with job hopping. So you might see a resume in our, somebody that's been in the industry for 15, 20 years, and they might be at 10 different places. We seem to have a turnover in most of the positions, no matter where you're at. It's about every 2 or 3 years, somebody will switch jobs, whether that's for more pay, a totally different part of the industry you wanted to get in. So it's a very forgiving industry when it comes to constantly wanting to better yourself and move to another company. So I think that's kind of an important place to start. So do I have the next? Okay, you got it. So what is the supply chain? So basically it's the entire system of producing and delivering a product is really what the supply chain is. So this supply chain would be for a manufacturer. And inside this supply chain, there is multiple jobs in each level of the supply chain. And we're going to concentrate, of course, on the logistics stop, but I'll jump through them real quick. So the supplier is usually all the raw materials. So that will be the company you're buying whatever your product is, you're getting your raw materials from that supplier. Procurement's a huge position, especially in the manufacturing side for an Anheuser-Busch or an Olin Winchester. The procurement department is the people that are actually purchasing and ordering all those products. Of course, you have the manufacturing sector of it, the product itself, once it gets out of manufacturing, and then you have the inventory management, which is a whole nother department. The distribution side of the industry is usually that whole warehouse world. So that's where you're going to have your forklift operators, your inventory management systems. You have our logistics world, which we'll jump into next. Then once your product's done, you have the whole retail market, whether that's now the e-commerce world that's totally exploded, are the actual, retail stores that thankfully are still around at least a little bit today. And then you have your end customer. So that when you hear the supply chain, that's really what they're talking about is the very raw material to that product finally gets to the customer and all the jobs and positions that are involved in that supply chain. Next slide. So logistics, we'll watch this. I'll just kind of tease the video a little bit. Like our industry was always very much kind of in the shadows. No one really knew, no one really pays attention on how you get that product. We have a saying in our industry, if you bought it, a truck brought it. So a lot of people just, the Amazon showed up at my door and boom, the product was there. But that whole supply chain and the whole logistics world, there's so many parts and everything to it. So no one really knew what logistics was. So about 5 or 6 years ago, our friends at UPS made this video, and it really wraps it up and explains it really well.
Logistics makes the world work better.
When it's planes in the sky for a chain of supply, that's logistics. When the parts for the line come precisely on time, that's logistics. A continuous link that is always in sync, that's logistics. Carbon footprint reduced, bottom line gets a boost, that's logistics. With new ways to compete, there'll be cheers on Wall Street, that's logistics. When technology knows right where everything goes, that's logistics. Bells will ring, ding, 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 that's logistics. There will be no more stress calls, you call UPS, that's logistics.
So a funny, the first time I saw that video or that commercial, I was sitting in the living room with my family, 3 kids, and they were younger. Of course, this is 5, 6 years ago, and they watched the video or watched the commercial, and I watched it, and my daughter was like, "So that's what you do?" And I said, "Yep." And my middle son, he was probably 12 at the time, he goes, "That's it?" Like, I think they always thought I was like this international spy or this really cool guy that traveled around, and they really had no clue what I did. And then once they finally saw it, and they were, "That's it?" Like, okay, so the product got here and you helped do it. But the commercial was great to kind of explain exactly what our logistics world is. So let's go to the next slide. So before we get into salaries, the logistics side of it is really, most of it's the transportation planning of it. But there's a lot more than just the warehouse and trucking industry. You got to remember we have the railroads moving a lot of products. So you can be a carman, you can be a conductor. There's a lot, the rail industry's a huge industry with a lot of really good paying jobs. We have the river, so we have all the barges and stuff like that. St. Louis is the biggest inland port in the United States. So a lot of our freight moves in and out on barges. We all cross the bridges constantly and stuff like that. You might look down and see the barge, but there is thousands of people that work in that barge industry. A boat conductor can make $250,000 a year just taking that boat just in between our locks and stuff like that. So there's a lot of good paying jobs. The barge jobs themselves are very, very difficult jobs. Unfortunately, not the highest paying jobs, very labor intensive, very dangerous. Unfortunately, we lose a lot of barge people to the river when they fall off at night. But not a lot, but 5, 6, 7 a year here in St. Louis probably, so way too many. But it's a very dangerous gig, but that is also a part of transportation and logistics. So we have warehouse professionals, forklift operators, my third-party logistics world with freight brokers. There's a whole sales industry. You got the delivery service, especially now that we see with the e-commerce, all the supply chain professionals, customer service, trucks, the equipment itself, trailers, mechanics are hugely in demand. And probably the biggest addition of our industry in the last 5 or so years is technology. I mean, we rely on IT professionals probably more than anything else that we have right now. Automation, is really exploding in our industry with, warehouses with robots. We are now bringing out, driverless trucks. So the IT section of transportation in the logistics world is incredibly in demand in our industry. So this is most of my slides and my numbers I kept in the 2019 numbers. The 2020 numbers are just now coming out, but the 2020 numbers are a little bit skewed because of COVID. So some industries had to pay more to keep employees. A lot of people, of course, didn't have, did lose some, jobs in our industry last year. So I've kind of kept the 19 numbers I'll talk about, because I think hopefully next year, if things get back to whatever a normal is, I think that's more on the path that we're at. So the total annual salary, this shows logistics managers. So it's probably that second level in my logistics industry. So you're probably only, maybe 4, 5, 6 years into your career when you kind of get into the management positions. So in the Midwest, that annual salary is anywhere between $91,000 and $96,000, which people don't know about. And we actually like to tell people that because we want them in our industry, because it is a very good paying industry. And actually, the logistics management that I'm quoting here, the Midwest is actually probably the highest paying in the industry. So most people think the East Coast and the West Coast have the high paying jobs, but the Midwest in our industry pays well. So if you kind of looked at the graph, about 20% of the industry makes $60,000 or less, but that's still a very good, very good salary if you've been in the industry for, 2, 3, 4 years, and you're going to be in that, probably 50 to 60 range. And then as you stay in and get more experienced, that 100,000, 120,000 is, very, very doable, and what probably most people in the industry on the logistics side make. I haven't seen too many on the 250 plus, but that's still 6% of it. And that's still a very good number. So next slide. One back. Yeah. Oh.
There we go.
There you go. Perfect. So straight out of high school. So if you do not, I know the one slide that Kay put up at the very beginning, it talked about needing a bachelor degree and stuff like that. Most of the positions in the third party logistics world, so the freight broker. So, what my company does is, a company, one of my customers, an Anheuser-Busch or a Olin Winchester or, Purina, they give me freight. So they tell me to move truckload freight from St. Louis to Fort Smith, Arkansas. My people go out and find a truck line to actually move that freight. So we don't own any trucks. We don't own any trains. We don't own any of the, any of the barges or any of the planes. But what we do is we're that third party logistics company that will hire the trucks to do the job. So that is that's the biggest segment of the logistics and transportation industry. So coming right out of high school, you can get that freight broker position. A lot of the bigger companies, which I have listed here, most of these, they definitely all have offices in St. Louis. There is some that have some in Columbia, Kansas City, but there's a lot of logistics companies in, Joplin and, Kirksville, smaller city or smaller towns and stuff like that. So coming straight out of high school, you could get a job, and you're probably going to make that first year anywhere between like $32,000 and $40,000 with no experience. In our industry, it's very geared towards, it's kind of a baptism by fire, to where it's all on the job training. No one really, knows how to move freight, of course, until you sit down and do it. I always tell people, especially ones that I hire that are new to the industry, it's a very simple industry. It is very easy to learn. We are truly moving product from point A to point B. There's a decent amount of complexities in there, but it's a very easy industry to learn. You have to be a certain type of person to be successful in it, because it's a tough industry. There's a lot of stress in it. You get your butt chewed out a lot. You can move 100 loads perfect, and it's the one that shut a plant down or didn't deliver right on time that your customer is going to just totally ream you out and scream. So you have to have kind of thick skin. You're also dealing with truck drivers and train operators and people on the other end that want things to go easy, and a lot of times they don't go easy. You have to now learn a lot of different languages. A lot of our truck drivers and things are from different nationalities in our country, so you have to kind of learn a bunch of different, to learn a lot of different things. So it's very personality driven. If you get in it and you're really good at it, you can move up to that logistics management position in 2, 3, 4 years. Because a lot of people, you might not stay in, you might not have that personality that clicks. So after a year or two, you're like, this isn't worth it. I'm going to go, maybe you'll get into the warehouse side of it. Maybe you'll get in the shipper side, the manufacturing side. But to stay in my logistics transportation world, it kind of takes a certain makeup. But if you can stick in it and you like it, those are real salaries. You could be making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 literally, 3 or 4 years in with no college degree whatsoever, and really not much need if you stay in this side of the logistics world to really go back for, any type of degrees or anything like that. Next slide. So we'll watch this video. This is about 2 years old, but it does kind of tell the story about what our trucking industry, the need for truck drivers and why they are.
The industry is currently short about 51,000 for-hire truck drivers, and companies are pulling out all the stops to attract and retain new workers, including sign-on bonuses, loan repayments for their training, and even more flexible scheduling. This issue is so acute, it's even caught the attention of the White House. Take a look.
And here representing the American Trucking Associations. And we're committing to 50,000 new opportunities over the next 5 years.
That's big stuff.
For Dan England, former president of the American Trucking Association, the truck driver shortage isn't just an industry problem. It's personal, as he looks to find drivers for his family's 4th-generation trucking company.
Right now, about just a little under 6,500 drivers. And gosh, if we had 500 more right now, we'd be very grateful.
The shortage has a ripple effect, impacting industries from retail to construction. And while the industry grapples with the driver shortage, a brewing trade war also stands to negatively impact the sector. The ATA says NAFTA trade generates over $6.5 billion for U.S. trucking companies alone.
Any interruption in that, anything in the dynamic or the relationship between the countries that would affect that is going to harm a lot of people. We'd like to see the status quo remain.
Beyond that, NAFTA trade also directly employs about 31,000 U.S. drivers. So any disruption in that trade relationship obviously is a really big concern to companies all across the country, guys. Back over to you.
Kate, let's talk quickly about some of the challenges in finding drivers, because the pay is actually pretty good. I mean, you listen to CNBC on the radio, you hear advertisements, $100,000 a year plus 25,000 signing bonus, etc. Why can't they find workers?
So, Brian, obviously this is a really tedious and tough job. You can be on the road for weeks at a time. There's also federal law that mandates you have to be 21 to haul interstate freight. So sometimes at age 18, people will go into a different industry and they won't return to trucking. That's another big issue. There's congestion, as you mentioned, not only in New Jersey, but all over the country. There's more freight than ever, so there's also more cars and more trucks on the road than ever. So there's a lot of different challenges that the industry is facing, and that's why you're seeing those incentives like big sign-on bonuses, multiple raises in a year, new trucks every 3 years like CR England offers in order to keep drivers interested in the job. So there's a lot of factors at play here.
So probably the biggest stuff there is, you know, you do have to be 21 years old in order to drive to cross state lines. So that does hurt our trucking industry a lot because, like she said in her report, we lose that 18-year-old that graduated from high school, and if he can't get his CDL and drive a truck, they go to construction, then he goes somewhere else. So we have in the trucking industry, it's kind of tough to get that, you know, that employee when they come back at, you know, 24, 25, 26 years old. And usually, you know, insurance companies dictate a lot on who companies can actually hire. So they really like that age to be 23, 24 years old. And you do have to go to a truck driving school in order to get your CDL. It's not that long. Sometimes you can have a 4 to 6 weeks course. It's pretty quick. Like St. Louis Community College here in St. Louis has a great truck driving program. But you do need that to get your CDL. So I think I have, they talked about wages a little bit. Next slide. I think I might have my slide here. The actual median salaries now is probably closer to $60,000. In the last 6 months, there's been such a demand for drivers that they have increased pay immensely in the last 6 months. So right now, a first-year compensation for a driver is anywhere between $50,000 and $70,000. And if you're a team driver, that means there's 2 of you in the truck driving. You'll probably get it's probably around $120,000. So it is very lucrative, and not all the jobs are. It's kind of, you know, it's a little bit misleading. The industry is a little bit, people think if you're going to be a truck driver, you are gone for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. That's actually very rare in our industry now. Everything's become very regional. So most of the times you're home 2-3 times a week, or you're home every single night to where you're bouncing back and forth from Kansas City or Indianapolis or something like that. So there is drivers out there that do live in their trucks and are gone constantly, but that really is a small part of the industry that's in the trucking world. So there's definitely a lot of money to be made on that. So next slide. This is kind of everything here is probably in the last 6 months gone up about $3 an hour at least. So this just is more of the stay-at-home local jobs that are out there that require a Class B or a Class C CDL, to where it's not that Class 1 that the top one is with the truck drivers. So still very good pay, and no college diploma needed. Next slide. So a big shortage in our industry is for diesel mechanics and trailer mechanics along those lines, especially the diesel mechanics, because these engines have become basically computers. You know, it's just like, you know, your car engine. You open the hood, it takes an incredibly qualified technician to work on trucks. This is the average starting wage for diesel mechanic. I know there's people coming out of a Rankin and stuff like that making $60,000, $70,000 to be a diesel mechanic their first year. So it is highly in demand. You get paid well. You do have to these new engines are coming out all the time, so you are constantly learning new things. But it is very much in demand to be a diesel mechanic, and pays incredibly well. Next slide. So the skills gap. This affects not only my industry and transportation. Of course, it has a lot. It also has to do with mechanics and plumbers and construction workers. But a big issue in America is the average age of a skilled worker is 56 years old right now. I think the average age of a truck driver is closer to 58. So we do not have a lot of younger people getting into skilled jobs. truck drivers, construction, all that stuff. And there's, as you can see on there, you know, a huge need for it. So in that, you know, in the 5 to 15 years when that group retires, there's going to be even a bigger gap because we are not filling in on the backside for these skilled workers. Next slide. So I'm going to get help the rest of the way on my presentation. I am a huge fan of Mr. Micro. I don't know if you guys know Micro from Dirty Jobs and a bunch of different programs on the Discovery Channel. He narrates Deadliest Catch and does a bunch of good things. But his biggest passion is this skilled labor force, and is this you don't need to go to college. We have all these great tech schools and everything to do. And he's actually started a foundation that has helped this. So I've seen him speak a couple times. He's incredibly entertaining, very much down to earth. But when I first started getting asked to do these talks a few years ago, I'm like, oh, I've heard Mike Rose say this exact thing. So I definitely let him take over my last 5-10 minutes here with a couple videos, because he says it 1 billion times better than I do. And he really nails it out. So even just starting with his quote here to, you know, we lend money to these kids that aren't going to get a job to be able to pay this back. So we'll watch a couple, we'll jump in, watch a couple videos. I'll let you know about his foundation because it's a great thing to tell your students about, and then we'll wrap it up, but we'll let Mike take over here for a little bit. So that's his foundation, microworks.com. I would definitely encourage you guys to check that out. You probably can do it during Jill's talk, and I want you to stay focused on mine. So, just wait till Jill comes on to do that. Next slide. So I thought this was good since I have a lot of counselors on here. Mike usually leads with this when he talks to a group, that this is a poster that was hanging in his guidance counselor's office back in 1977. Work smart, not hard. So, and as he talks about, if you watch him speak, he talks about this all the time, to where, there was always that huge push to go to college, go to college. That's the only way you're going to be successful in life, if you get a college degree. So he changed it to work smart and hard. So that's kind of the gist behind his drive for this. Next slide. So here's the first, there'll be 2 videos right back to back.
Mike Rowe here at a fabulous construction site to share with you some important thoughts on the expression alternative education. Ready? Allow me to elaborate. Once upon a time, the alternative was another way to do something. Today, alternative is another way to do a thing if you weren't able to do the thing the way you originally wanted to. Think about it. The alternative in sports is the guy who sits on the bench, waiting for the starter to break his ankle so he can play. On Broadway, the alternative is the understudy who sits backstage, waiting for the lead to break his ankle so he can get on stage and perform. In television, alternative programming is the crap they put on in the summertime when they know nobody's watching. You get the meaning, right? The question is, what genius decided it would be a good idea to describe the kinds of education that allowed this hospital to be built as alternative? Walk with me. We used to tell our kids that learning a trade was a great way to secure a worthwhile future. We don't tell them that anymore. Today, we tell them that if they want a really, really good job, they're going to need to get a 4-year degree. We are so convinced that the best path to happiness comes with an expensive degree from a big university that we've forgotten about all the other alternatives. Trade schools, technical schools, community colleges, fellowships, apprenticeships, on-the-job training, all that stuff just kind of went out the window. We've turned them into educational consolation prizes, which brings me back to my earlier analysis. Let's keep walking.
All right, next video.
Look, I've got nothing bad to say about a college education, really. I have one, I wouldn't trade it for anything. And if you have the desire and the money to pay for a 4-year degree, I say go for it. But look, we need to stop promoting higher education at the expense of every other form of learning. It's just crazy. It leads to unintended consequences. And right now we got a big one. It's called a skills gap. And the skills gap is bad news for anybody who's addicted to paved roads or electricity or indoor plumbing. Welders, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, steam fitters, pipe fitters, all across the country, there's shortages in these areas, even with unemployment going through the roof. It's crazy. 50 years ago, those jobs were critical. They still are. The problem is we just don't value them the way we used to. So we don't encourage people to pursue them. We're so focused on getting into the corner office, we forgot how to build a corner office.
Very good. So that's why I love that video. I could have never explained it like that. He does it so well. So he does a scholarship program every year for our high school students. And they give out a lot of money for if you're going to go to a trade school or all this other stuff. So, and it's not an easy scholarship to get. If you watch the videos on his website, the young adults have to work very hard to get awarded it. He makes them, you know, it is not write 500 words and he picks people. He does it the micro way of, you know, they have to do videos and they have to work really hard to get to scholarship, but he gives out a lot of money. So if you have students that are looking to go this path, I would definitely have them look at his program. So next. So this is just, you know, real quick of what he does that, you know, he's been doing it for 13, 14 years, you know, 18 different grades, and, you know, he has 0 whiners awarded. So like I said, you have to prove yourself to get Mike's deal. So this is my last video. This one kind of sums up a little bit of everything. It's about 5 minutes long, but I think it's always really good. So.
There are only 2 things I can tell you today that come with absolutely no agenda. The first is congratulations. The second is good luck. Everything else is what I like to call the dirty truth, which is just another way of saying it's my opinion. And in my opinion, you have all been given some terrible advice. And that advice is this: follow your passion. Every time I watch the Oscars, I cringe when some famous movie star, trophy in hand, starts to deconstruct the secret of their success. It's always the same thing. Don't let anyone tell you that you don't have what it takes, kid. And the ever-popular, never give up on your dreams. Look, I understand the importance of persistence and the value of encouragement, but who tells a stranger to never give up on their dreams without even knowing what it is they're dreaming? I mean, how can Lady Gaga possibly know where your passion will lead you? Have these people never seen American Idol? Year after year, thousands of aspiring American Idols show up with great expectations, only to learn that they don't possess the skills they thought they did. What's really amazing, though, is not their lack of talent. The world's full of people who can't sing. It's their genuine shock at being rejected. The incredible realization that their passion and their ability had nothing to do with each other. Look, if we're talking about your hobby, by all means, let your passion lead you. But when it comes to making a living, it's easy to forget the dirty truth. Just because you're passionate about something doesn't mean you won't suck at it. And just because you've earned a degree in your chosen field, it doesn't mean you're going to find your dream job. Dream jobs are usually just that, dreams. But their imaginary existence just might keep you from exploring careers that offer a legitimate chance to perform meaningful work and develop a genuine passion for the job you already have. Because here's another dirty truth. Your happiness on the job has very little to do with the work itself. On Dirty Jobs, I remember a very successful septic tank cleaner, a multimillionaire who told me the secret to his success. I looked around to see where everyone else was headed, he said. And then I went the opposite way. Then I got good at my work. Then I began to prosper. And then one day I realized I was passionate about other people's crap. I've heard that same basic story from welders, plumbers, carpenters, electricians, HVAC professionals, hundreds of other skilled tradesmen who followed opportunity, not passion, and prospered as a result. Consider the reality of the current job market. Right now, millions of people with degrees and diplomas are out there competing for a relatively narrow set of opportunities that polite society calls good careers. Now, meanwhile, employers are struggling to fill nearly 5.8 million jobs that nobody's trained to do. This is the skills gap. It's real, and its cause is actually very simple. When people follow their passion, they miss out on all kinds of opportunities they didn't even know existed. When I was 16, I wanted to follow in my grandfather's footsteps. He was a skilled tradesman, could build a house without a blueprint. That was my passion, and I followed it for years. I took all the shop classes at school. I did all I could to absorb the knowledge and skill that came so easily to my granddad. Unfortunately, the handy gene is recessive. It skipped right over me, and I struggled mightily to overcome my deficiencies, but I couldn't. I was one of those contestants on American Idol who believed his passion was enough to ensure his success. One day, I brought home a sconce I had made in wood shop. Looked like a paramecium. After a heavy sigh, my granddad gave me the best advice I've ever received. He told me, Mike, you can still be a tradesman, but only if you get yourself a different kind of toolbox. At the time, this felt contrary to everything I believed about the importance of passion and persistence and staying the course. But of course, he was right, because staying the course, that only makes sense if you're headed in a sensible direction. And while passion is way too important to be without, it is way too fickle to follow around. Which brings us to the final dirty truth. Never follow your passion, but always bring it with you. Congratulations again, and good luck. I'm Mike Rowe from MicroWorks for Prager University.
To subscribe to our YouTube channel, click here.
All right, so just a quick sum up. Our industry, as we've gone through everything, we're still desperately looking to hire. Even through COVID and everything, while some places, did get hit, we were kind of recession proof, and, we didn't know we'd be pandemic proof, but we're kind of pandemic proof. People still are always going to buy something, and it still has to be made, and it still has to be delivered. And we have a great, great industry that supplies all of that. And a lot of people don't know about our industry. That's why I like doing these talks. So I definitely encourage you to, have your students definitely take a look at us. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, Brad. So we're just running like a few minutes behind, but I'm wondering if I might turn to Danielle and see if there are any quick questions from the chat that we might have for Brad before Dr. Bernard Bracy comes up.
No, there are no questions currently in the chat.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So next up, we have Dr. Jill Bernard Bracy. She's the Associate Director at UMSL's Supply Chain Risk and Resilience Research Institute.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Brad. It's always a pleasure to hear your presentations. I just want to say about Brad, he didn't mention in his introduction that he's also the president of the Logistics and Transportation Association of North America and the Transportation Club of St. Louis, and he sits on several boards. So he knows our industry inside and out. He's incredibly well connected. So the information that he presented is spot on. And I have Brad come and present at the university, and you may think that's counterintuitive considering he just spent the last 10 minutes talking about why higher education is not important to our industry. or maybe not as important as you would think. But that's actually how I got involved with DESE and with this program, is that we have so many industry partners come to us looking for entry-level positions and employees to fill their entry-level positions, that we started a program for career pathways for students who are not interested in pursuing higher education, but were ready to go directly into industry, and presenting counselors with information about how students could go about doing that. But because there is so many opportunities from our employers, not just in the St. Louis region, but really across the country, there are entry-level opportunities for if you don't need higher education, but there's definitely opportunities for students who want to go into higher education to enter into our industry. So as Kate said, my name is Jill Bernard Bracy. I'm faculty in the Supply Chain and Analytics Department at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. I primarily teach courses in Introduction to Supply Chain Management to undergraduates, Quantitative Methods for Business to undergraduates, and Supply Chain Strategy to graduate students. I pursued my PhD a little over a decade ago, and I finished in 2015, and my degree is in logistics with emphasis in analytics, applied analytics for transportation. And I think what's really important about that is that the information that Kate presented and then Brad focused on logistics is that that's where it was. And that's where the industry still is. But the Academy, we're recognizing that it's so much more than that. And we've brought transportation, we've brought logistics, we've brought analytics under this realm of supply chain management. So that's what I'm going to talk about today as our supply chain management program at UMSL. So if you go to the next slide, please. So just to start off with why UMSL is awesome, and then I'll tell you about our program. We boast that we're the most comprehensive program in Missouri. We were ranked this year number 8 in the best masters in supply chain management by intelligent.com. We are ranked 15 supply chain and logistics program in the US by Great Value Colleges in 2019. We have a very flexible program. We offer 100% online. We offer in-person and blended classes. Our programs are designed to meet demands for a citizen data scientist. This is kind of a new term, and what this means is that we are teaching our students how to use advanced analytics, even if they're not interested in going into a statistics or analytical role. So regardless of what their position is in the supply chain realm, they're going to be able to use advanced analytics, which is incredibly in high demand. And then really importantly, we have an active advisory board that I will talk to in just a little bit. So you can go to the next slide. So the study of supply chain management has evolved out of 2 departments, marketing and operations management. And in the Academy, you can still see some supply chain programs that fall underneath those disciplines. Our program at UMSL evolved out of operations management, but our transportation program was in marketing. So now we've brought operations management, logistics, transportation, and all the other functions of supply chain management that Brad mentioned, from purchasing and procurement, negotiations, all the way down together under the supply chain management umbrella. So at UMSL, the study of supply chain management focuses on the entire supply chain, from acquisition of raw materials, sourcing and procurement, through the production and the manufacturing, all the way to the point of consumption. Next slide, please. So here are all of our different programs. You can get a BSBA, emphasis in supply chain management, which I'm going to focus on. That's our major. Essentially, if you're going to UMSL and you say I'm majoring in supply chain, you're going to actually get a degree in you're actually going to get a BSBA with the emphasis in supply chain. We also have a minor. You can also study in the graduate level analytics, supply chain management, or supply chain analytics. We have a graduate certificate, and then we have a PhD in the subject as well. Okay, regardless of which program you go through at what level, students will gain a domain knowledge of supply chain management, logistics, production and service operations management, and develop skills in descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics. Next slide. So as I mentioned, in the Academy and even in industry, supply chain typically was falling underneath the marketing umbrella or the operations management umbrella. And still today in industry, some companies have it where if you are involved in supply chain management, you're reporting to the chief marketing officer or you're reporting to the chief operating officer. But we're seeing more and more chief supply chain officers. And I think the interesting thing about the field is that we did typically look at it as logistics and transportation as was presented before, but it's so much more than that. And the pandemic has really brought that to life. And a lot of people didn't know what supply chain management was until there was no toilet paper at the grocery store at the start of the pandemic. And then all of a sudden you started hearing about the supply chain and the disruptions to the supply chain and how the supply chain has broken down. And focusing on that, we're looking at that in the academy and we're saying there are two ways that we can solve this problem. One, we can do it through a qualitative track. So students who are not interested in the numbers can go through this supply chain management track on the left, where they're focusing on buying, procuring, sourcing, the actual transportation, global supply management, negotiations, or they can fall into the right side of this where they're saying, I really like the numbers and I really want to get into the analytical side of things and go through that quantitative track that traditionally fell under operations research or operations management. There is very high demand for both. So I think that's really what separates our program at UMSL from other universities is the fact that we do offer both tracks. A lot of schools will offer either one, a very traditional qualitative focus, or the more operations management research focus. But here we offer both. So if you're numbers or not numbers oriented. Next slide, please. Briefly, this is our new MS and Supply Chain and Analytics program. We're one of the best in the country, and it's set up the same way where you can go through the qualitative or the quantitative track. So if you know anybody who's interested in pursuing their supply chain degree, it's a fantastic program to look into. Next slide, please. Okay, this is really where I want to focus the bulk of my presentation. So when your students are looking at programs, I think it's incredibly important that they're looking for practical application. We teach theory is important, but we also boast that we have a very practically applied program. Prior to this meeting, I came from our advisory board meeting. We have a very active advisory board who guides all facets of our curriculum. So you can see here we have major international corporations like Bayer, and we have small regional corporations like Weekends Only. But they are looking at our program and they are making sure that what we are teaching our students is what they need to succeed in industry. So for example, my quantitative methods for business course, I took it to our advisory board and I said, this is a new course we're developing. It's replacing calculus. We realized that our students taking a purely calculus course isn't what's best preparing them for industry. What do we need to do? And they said, we need them to know Excel. Kate mentioned Excel. We need them to know Excel inside and out, how to manipulate large data sets and to communicate their findings. We also need them to know a little bit about Tableau and how that works too. And that's what the course is. The course teaches a little bit of statistics, a little bit of calculus, but it primarily focuses on here's data analytics, here's how to use Excel to communicate those findings and data analysis. So my point is that an advisory board, regardless of the program your students are looking at, really allows the curriculum to follow what's happening in industry. We in the academy like to think that what we do guides industry practice. I'm not quite sure that's true, and Brad would probably say it's not true, that the academy follows what's happening in industry, and then we teach our students appropriately. Next slide, please. Another thing that's really valuable to our program, but it's incredibly important that when your students are looking at programs, things that they consider are how they are engaging with industry. I think it's really important to teach students, what they need to know, but as you know, it's a lot about who you know too. So allowing them to get in front of industry often is incredibly important. We do that through guest speakers. We have virtual guest speakers and in-person guest speakers that come in. Sometimes they teach specific lectures on forecasting, for example. Sometimes they just tell their story of who they are and how they got to where they are today. We do facility tours. A lot of students have never seen a warehouse, but they're studying about it and they have no idea how an operations line works. So getting the students into those facilities to actually see what they're studying is really important. Other networking events through organizations such as Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals. Brad and I both serve on that board. That's a great way for students in the academy and industry to stay involved with one another. We also have executive mentoring. We do this on 2 levels. We do it through our chief of the C level pairs with the students. So we have, and we also pair young alumni or those who have just entered into the workforce with students. And it allows students to get an understanding of industry, one, perhaps to aspire to where they want to be in that C-level suite, and then the other to give students a realization of here's what's actually going to happen when you enter into the workforce with a bachelor's degree. And I think they really need both perspectives. My favorite thing about this program is that we're not looking at the students that necessarily have the highest GPA. We're looking at students with potential and that really want to succeed in industry. So it is a exclusive program and students are nominated and put into the program, but they are based on their potential. And then we also make sure that students have a lot of experiential learning through class projects, internships, and applied research projects. Again, the hands-on hard skills are incredibly important. You know, and I think that's what Mike Rowe was saying about we need students to have skill sets. When they graduate, they need to be able to say, I can do this. And that's really what's embedded into our program, that they can say, here are the different things that we can do in our program, we can do because of our program. Okay, next slide, please. The other cool thing, before I read what's on the slide, this is Juwan. She just graduated from our PhD program and is going up to the University of Wisconsin for a teaching position this summer, but she's holding a drone. And I think that, you know, you study or you hear about logistics, you hear about transportation and supply chain, and you think how boring, like that could not be more boring. But it's actually really cool. I mean, her entire dissertation and what she's studying is delivery of products using drones. And that's a real thing. It's not like, oh, that might happen or it's futuristic. It's happening. She's studying about using drones to deliver vaccines to remote populations in third world countries, because that's how they're getting their blood and other vaccines and vital resources. So that's just one example. We have Anheuser-Busch on our advisory board, and they just did a presentation on using AI to drive their trucks. And it's not like it's something that might happen. It's something they're using and they're implementing right now. So I think the technology side of things is really cool, and students don't really see that that's part of it. But Kate and Brad both presented some statistics on our industry. But 93% of our graduates are employed or pursuing further education after graduation. And I would feel that this is probably very true across the board. And honestly, I'm surprised it's not 100% because, as Brad mentioned, there's huge need for skilled labor and entry-level labor in our program or in our industry. It's projected to grow with a median annual salary of $78,000. And my favorite is the bottom. Supply chain management was recently recognized as the most recommended major by payscale.com. Why? Next slide, please. It's because there's so many jobs. So Brad talked about truck drivers. That's a job. He talked about the diesel mechanic. That's a job. And those logistics and those transportation management positions are jobs, but there's so many more than that. And he briefly went through the various fields, but I'm going to touch on him again because he did focus on logistics. So I want to go through kind of those various facets of supply chain management and the job opportunities again. So on the left side, you can see kind of the major functions in supply chain. The first is sourcing and purchasing, or procurement. This is the procurement of products used in a business by identifying potential supplier sources, screening them, negotiating favorable payment terms, and developing mutual beneficial relationships. The next one is manufacturing and operations. So you plan, schedule, and manage one or more manufacturing production processes to ensure that the performance, volume, and quality goals are being met. The next is warehousing. You manage and supervise all activities of one or multiple warehouses, which often involve expediting and receiving and shipping of goods, ensuring efficient and organized storage of products. The next is supply chain, and then transportation, which is my favorite. You choose goods that are shipped. You ensure that goods are shipped and delivered safely and efficiently by selecting the best transportation mode, designing the delivery route, coordinating the system, all the way from point of origin to point of consumption. Planning, you create demand forecasts and coordinate supply chain resources in order to optimize the delivery. And then finally, the cross functions, which is a combination of these. And then in our program, we also lump in analytics. So in the middle, you can see the different jobs from the kind of more entry level with a bachelor's degree, mid-level, up to the senior level. So you can see the career paths. What I just read is on our website. I did not write that. My colleague Mateus Enns put that together for me. But I think if you have students interested in this field, it's a really great resource to say, here's an overview of the different functions of supply chain and the different job opportunities that fall within those. Okay, next one, please. Companies that recruit UMSL supply chain students. I put this up here not just to say UMSL is awesome, but to show you the different companies that hire supply chain students. Some of these you may think are very obvious. Boeing. You know, Boeing is going to hire somebody who teaches or who has an understanding of supply chain and logistics. But companies that you might not think of, Mercy, maybe now after the pandemic, but prior to the pandemic, you wouldn't really think that Mercy needed supply chain managers to make sure that they're procuring PPE, getting it to the region, and then getting it to the specific hospital and doctor that needs it, but they do. St. Louis Area Food Bank. Again, you might not think that they're hiring supply chain managers, but they have to procure their food and then distribute their food. So all of these companies have supply chain, logistics, transportation occupations embedded in what they do, even if they're not seen as traditional logistics supply chain companies. So just keep that in mind. If your student wants to go to work at Anheuser-Busch and that's their dream, they are hiring logistics, supply chain, transportation like crazy. So, and this is not an all-inclusive list, but I think it gives you a nice idea of the wide range of companies that do hire our students. And that's Kayla. She graduated this year and is now working at Express Scripts. Okay, next slide, please. So that's kind of a pretty brief overview of our program, but I know we're a little short of time because Brad took way too long. I'm just kidding, Brad. I'm just kidding. You did a fantastic job. But if you have questions about our program, my chair, Dr. Lee, is always happy to talk about our program, what we teach, and how we're involved with the high schools and with industry. His information's there. My information's here. You can always reach out to me. I'm happy to tell you more about our program as well. But we have a website that we're in the middle of redoing. So some of the content is awesome and some of it you can tell is still under construction. But the content is there. It's just not as aesthetically pleasing as we would like it to be. So if you would like more information about our program specifically, it's there. But if you have any questions about our program or our industry, Brad and I are happy to answer those. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Bernard Bracy. So again, Danielle, are we seeing things come up in the chat?
No questions in the chat.
So I might start off with a quick question. So I'm wondering if you have a student, Dr. Bernard Bracy, who's interested in the program at UMSL, are there prerequisites that they should be taking in high school to make the transition to that program or acceptance into that program easier?
That's a great question. So into our specific program, are there high school courses? Honestly, I'm not sure. So our program is primarily transfer students. Where UMSL is a feeder school from the community colleges, which most of you probably know. First-time freshmen are not the majority of our population. And we do have an older population. So a lot of the students at UMSL are returning. Our average age is 24, which is higher than most universities. But to prepare for our program, I would think the best would be to have a solid understanding of basic statistics and basic algebra. Students really struggle with those, and I think that's a challenge to moving forward in our curriculum. And it's not that our curriculum is that quantitatively heavy, but I think students tend to be turned off by our degree if they don't have a nice foundation in statistics or algebra, and just a basic working understanding of those. So nothing advanced, but that would be my recommendation to prepare for the program is to make sure that you have a good understanding of those.
Thanks. I might just take a minute to see if there are any other questions from attendees that we can put in the chat. And if everyone feels incredibly well informed, we can move on to closing things out.
You want me to do announcements?
I thought I would just do the STEMSTL one if you don't mind doing the.
Okay, lots of announcements. We mentioned last week that Julie Kampschroeder, who many of you know from her time at Rittner and Pattonville, has started a partnership with SCORE to offer a free financial aid certificate program for counselors. So if you're interested in that, there's the link. The PDF that's in the chat, all of the links are clickable. And I'll send it out after today as well. I did find a list of colleges requiring vaccination for fall enrollment. All of the colleges at this point are outside of Missouri and Illinois, but there's a link on the Chronicle website for your interest. A reminder again, the Brownpreneurs Teen Summit is coming up in July, and please share that with your students. And also sharing with you a Generation Teach Summer Teaching Fellowship that's specifically for Black and Brown students interested in a career in teaching, and is for sophomore high school students all the way through undergrad students. And there's some links there for more information and applying, and the deadline is May the 5th. And then same slide, so good we put it in twice, but there's one more piece of information on here, which is that NPower is holding a virtual high school event next week for students who might be interested in their program. And then finally, RIAC, the Regional Youth Employment Coalition, is hosting a youth conference on career pathways, and it's all virtual this year, May 4th through 6th, and they will focus on career pathways in IT, health, manufacturing, and construction trades. And they'll also have a financial literacy program with support from Bank of America. And you can click on the image to be able to register.
Okay, and then on the STEMSTL side, on Friday, May 7th, we are cautiously having an in-person gathering. So this is part of Missouri STEM Celebration Week. So the Missouri Chamber has established this week as a chance to celebrate what's going on in STEM instruction and STEM workforce. They will be having a signing event for their students who have received the STEM scholarships. So just like we celebrate athletes who are committing to going to a school to play, Missouri STEM Celebration Week celebrates students who have committed to post-secondary training in STEM fields. So, you know, if you subscribe to STEMSTL newsletters, you'll see information going out about it'll be broadcast like online, the event from Jeff City. But then as part of this like overall celebration of STEM learning and STEM workforce, on Friday afternoon from 4 to 6 on May 7th, we'll be gathering in the Cortex Commons. So it will be outdoors. We will be policing masks like crazy. We'll be ensuring everybody's 6 feet apart so that we're all very safe. But we would really love to see everyone come to this event. We'll have some free cupcakes to give out. Please bring your families. We'll have balloon artists. We'll have different members of the STEM ecosystem there doing some STEM activities. So we would really love to see you. There'll be a link in the chat to register at the Eventbrite, and you can click on this image in the slide deck. So that is that event. Please do attend, bring your kiddos. And with that, I'm gonna hand it off to Dr. Dawn to close us out.
Okay, so this has been very informative today. Very great information. So thanks to both of our presenters. I really appreciate your time and effort put in to give this information today. So if you would type one word in the chat to describe how you feel about the workshop, and make sure you complete the evaluation survey that'll be sent to you via email. Also remember that these things will be available to you on the website within the next few days here. And we just want to close out by saying thank you. If you are able, register for the workshop next week and take into consideration all the announcements. Stay safe, stay well, and have a great, wonderful weekend.